What is going on, guys? Tweaking Timber Outdoors, and here's another part of the how to fly fish, how to conventional fish Q&A. Started off last week completely with new angler questions, and so I figured we continue on with that, moving on into some more intermediate questions to help you guys be better anglers. So let's check it out. Okay. So T. Mendler, when casting a fly rod, should you have a stiff wrist and stiff forearm, or is it okay to use the flick of your wrist? When I first started, I did it all on wrist and quickly learned fatigue very fast that way. What do you think? So, essentially, I think, yes, for new anglers, it's really important to understand the plane in which your hand is trying to work. So from here to here for a basic cast typically, but what you'll quickly learn is that situationally, that's not always going to be the right case. Sometimes you're going to need to impart a little extra flick, sometimes a little more sidearm, sometimes your plane might come up if you have something behind you, or if you want to add a pile cast, extra slack. So the more you develop your own personal casting style, the better off you'll be. But it is very crucial to understand the basic fundamentals of a progressively quickening extension, or your pace starts from slower to faster to a brisk stop, regardless of whatever plane you use. So to start, I would suggest probably a stiffer wrist and a stiffer forearm, just to understand that you're creating a plane one way or the other, and it's not an arc, because what you'll see sometimes is people will do this. But as you start to develop that muscle memory and you'll understand how the rod's supposed to feel when you load it, sometimes there are situations where your style might change a little bit. But yes, it's a great question. Let's see. How to locate fish during different conditions. If you're fishing where there aren't any fish, you're not going to be able to catch anything. What should we do? So, understanding fundamental basics on where to find fish is crucial. I have a couple videos on this actually in my channel, so check those out. But a brief summarization here would be, I utilize a very cheesy saying for brand new anglers that I actually stole, if you will, from Tom Rosenbauer. That is, rocks rock, foam is home, and wood is good. So if you're in a stream, find some rocks, or if you're in even a pond or a lake, find rock beds certain parts of the year where, especially in a stream, it's going to break the current in front of that rock or behind that rock. Foam in a stream is where all the majority of the nutrients are, as well as that's where the seam is, where you're going to find quite a few fish. So fish along those foam areas, those foam lines, that's where the seams are in the stream. And then wood is good. From the bank, you see a log jam come out, or you see a log breaking current in a stream. That's a great place to fish. In still water as well, that's usually a good place to fish to find some form of aquatic life. Okay? That's about as simple as you can break it down for the first time angler out. Let's see. What rod and reel setup with line would you recommend, and what would be best great lure to buy? So if we're going to go fly rod, if you're fishing just in general, you want to get out, you want to catch panfish to bass, maybe the occasional carp, 5/6 weight is what we typically suggest with a 5/6 reel. I would, if you're a brand new angler for a fly rod, I would for sure recommend a full flex or mid flex rod. Lets you feel the rod load a little better. And I typically will also suggest to overline the rod, but that's not necessarily a necessity. You could go with a 5 weight or 6 weight line, or a 6 weight, 7 weight line, depending on what rod you buy. Go up by one, helps you load the rod again faster and easier. For conventional spinning gear, typically we start people off with a spinning rod. Like a I would just go find something that's affordable, okay? Because if you're spending all your money and you don't know what to do, you're allowed, so if you spend less money on gear and more money on tackle, I've seen better results from using lower end gear and a multitude of different tackle options than having a really nice rod and reel and only having a small selection to choose from to cast out to fish. So I would also recommend probably just, to start whatever the most expensive thing, or so the most quality gear you can afford at the time. You'll see a better return on in the long run. However, again, you'll have less money for tackle. So take that into consideration, that if you're going to be a bank guy or a wade guy, definitely make sure you're not spending too much of your money right off the bat, because you're going to need supplies later on. Let's see. As a noob, I'd like to get some tips on what provokes a brook trout feed. Like what triggers a feed and what shuts them off. Brook trout, if you're in the mountains or you're in some remote streams, not much is going to be needed to trigger those fish to feed. Brook trout love stimulators. Basically, they're opportunistic fish. And especially in smaller streams, the forage supply, food that they're going to eat, is not that high. Like there's the quantity is not there. So they are very opportunistic. So if you throw out a size 14, size 12, size 10 even stim, like a stimulator, that stimmy hatch, if you call it, is just them reacting to something big hitting the water and they need to eat. And so that can actually be very fun to go small stream fishing for brookies, because they're opportunistic. What I would suggest is, if you think that they're shutting off, more than likely it's because they're spooked somehow. So you fish the same spot too long, or you're splashing down on the water, or you're wading too close, or you're kind of recklessly walking through the water. That can happen to the best of us. We get excited or whatever, but you really want to take your time, no matter what you're wading, to get in there really stealthily and not to kick rocks around or stir the ground sediment, the bed sediment. So just be very careful of that. Also, that lateral line on those fish is very delicate, so avoid also getting an eyesight as well. Just fish downstream and be very subtle when you're hitting the water. Let's see. What would be a good reliable bait and rod for beginner at fly fishing? Bait, if you mean fly, I have a couple videos on my top flies to choose from. A good assortment would be something like, I don't know what you're fishing for, but Adams patterns, elk hair caddis, zebra midge, woolly bugger, hare's ear nymph, prince nymph, stonefly. But my biggest suggestion to you would be this: go to a local fly shop and ask them what they are catching fish on. Usually, if they're a good fly shop, they'll point you in the right direction, and they'll be very kind and nice about it, because they want your long-term business. Local fly shops are a wealth of knowledge that help guys locally get what they need when they need it. Let's see. What size fly lines and leaders do you use for what weight rods? So, let's see. If I'm fishing a 5-weight rod, I like to overline, because I fish smaller waters usually, and it allows me to load the rod to its butter zone, if you will, its gem zone, a little sooner. So that'd be a 6-weight line. And then a leader depends on the fly. That's usually the case. If I'm throwing streamers, it's a heavier leader. If I'm throwing dries, it's usually a lighter leader. Tapered leaders. I make my own, but I also do fish, because I work with Lucky Tackle Box and Umpqua. I do get Umpqua tapered leaders, and I love them. But typically, I will not fish anything smaller than 3-4X. That's leader or tippet, unless I really have to. Why? Because it allows you to get those fish to your hand quicker, and get the fish back in the water healthier. Where's a good place to fish for trout for beginners? Well, if you do have a locally stocked pond that is private, usually somebody there will be more than willing to help you. Also, many outfitters, I would definitely look into hiring a guide. You will save a ton of money in the long run, and tons of time learning if you hire a guide for the first year you fish, or second year you fish, or even if it's your 10th year.